When I was 13 years old, I went over to his house and he molested me for the first time. When I left, I told my mom. She said, "Well, what did you think was going to happen? Look at what you're wearing." My name is Hollie Adams. I am a mother, a wife, and a survivor of abuse and Before I went to college, right after I graduated high school, I had just turned 17 years old. I worked at a department store. I was manipulated by a coworker who was significantly older than me by about 10 years. He would not listen to my consent. When I would say no and try to kind of brush him off and want him to go away, he would just keep hanging around. And he would follow me to the locker rooms in the back and would push me up against the lockers and forcefully kiss me or do things that I didn't consent to. Eventually, he started following me out on every single break I had and sexually assault me in my car. This was only a couple years after the abuse ended, so I was still really traumatized. I had still not even started to process the sexual abuse, and I was still in the stage of my healing where I had not acknowledged that I had not figured out my self-worth yet. My thought process at the time, honestly, was in order to survive the situation, I just need to let it happen because that's safer than causing a problem. It perpetuated the self-blame and the shame because I felt like I was doing it to myself all over again, just like I felt like when I was a kid. One night, I went out with him and ended up in an apartment, and he to me, and I didn't say anything about it for a while because it took me a while to process that I was, because this was a significantly more violent situation than the sexual abuse. The sexual abuse was all about him trying to make me feel good and like show me how to have. It was grooming. This was grooming. It was just aggressive. He knew I didn't want to do it. I knew I didn't want to do it. I knew I couldn't leave. He had a gun. I wasn't threatened with the gun directly, but I was aware that there was a gun in the house. He drove me there. I didn't have a way out. I was in a different city than I lived in, so I needed him to take me home. So I knew that for me to be able to get home, I have to just get through this. When I realized that I was going to be, I tried to do other things because I thought that that would prevent him from trying to like me, because I didn't want that to happen. I never reported that because it always felt like I put myself in that situation. I understand survivors on both ends who want to report it and who don't want to report it. So I have never encouraged that as the best option all the time, because while it can be the best option, sometimes that's not what is going to be best for your healing. One of my first memories is of seeing my mom pass out on the floor when I was around 8 years old. She had bipolar disorder, and she also was drinking. She passed out because she was mixing with the bipolar medication, and I thought that she was dead. So I called my grandma, and she showed up and found out she was okay. But speed up a couple years later, I was about 12 years old, and she started dating a guy who drank a lot, and he really encouraged that drinking with her, and she developed a drinking problem. Their relationship turned really violent, and that was my first experience seeing domestic violence. They kind of fought back and forth, but I remember her having black eyes, broken bones, and she was always lying about what the reason was. But because of the domestic violence, she started drinking really heavily. And this was my first experience with violence, and also because I saw her by him. And one of my memories is actually of her calling my name to help her. I didn't really know what to do. I was only 12 years old, so I called my dad. My dad came and he helped, but this went on for about a year. Like a lot of domestic violence survivors, she was like in it, and she didn't really want out, so she would like want the help in the moment, but she wasn't really ready to leave. Me and my sister were kind of going through that with her. After my mom stopped seeing that guy, she started talking to our neighbor. Our neighbor was a guy that had tattoos all over him, never had a shirt on. He was kind of just like the neighborhood single guy. My mom was also single and was really attracted to him. She had a problem at this point and also had addiction, so she was just super into him. She would bring him over all the time, and it kind of became like we would just all hang out together. It didn't take long before he started flirting with me in front of my mom. We would all be like hanging out in the kitchen together, and they would be drinking, and he would make gestures at me. At the time, me and my mom shared a phone, and they would text back and forth, but eventually, over time, he started texting me instead of her. And the conversations changed from just really innocent to asking me about what I had done with boys up until that point. And then when I was 13 years old, the neighbor sent me a naked picture of himself. Then he asked me to send him one. I kind of freaked out because I knew that that was gross and not okay. When I told my mom about the picture that he sent, she said that, oh, that was for me. And he tried to say that it was for her, but he was talking to me. He started telling me what he wanted to do to me. And at 13, I kind of played into it. It made me feel like I was getting attention. I was bullied in school at this point, and my parents were divorced. I didn't have a lot of positive attention. So him complimenting me and being nice to me felt really good, and so I didn't notice it as anything wrong. When I started noticing that something was really wrong was when it got super and he was starting to say, I want to do this to you. At first, it kind of just seemed like a game. Like, I didn't think that anything was really going to happen. I was 13 and he was like 30. I told my mom about it, and she just said, that's just how he is. Like, don't dress with short shorts or low-cut shirts around him, because that's just how he is. And then when I was 13 years old, I went over to his house, and he molested me for the first time. When I left, I told my mom. She said, well, what did you think was going to happen? Look at what you're wearing. And for the next 2 years, she continued to have him. She continued to invite him over, knowing what was going on. He kept trying to advance with me all the way up until I was 15 years old was the last time that I remember him sexually assaulting me. And he came over to my house and he tried to come into my room. My mom would get at nighttime and talk to him and invite him over, and then she would go to her room and fall asleep and be totally passed out, and then he would come over, and then it was just us. One of the times I was 14 and he came over in the middle of the night, and I heard someone in the kitchen, and I walked out of my bedroom and he was in the kitchen right outside my bedroom door. And I was like, oh, I'll go get my mom. And he said, no, I'm here for you. And I freaked out and I ran to my mom's room and I heard him leave the back door. And I told her what happened. She said, I'm gonna go ask him. And so she walked over to his house and asked him if it happened. And when she came back, she said, he said you're lying. So when I was 15, the last time that it happened, he came to my room and I made a big ruckus. So it got kind of loud and he ran out, and I ran downstairs, told my mom. She didn't believe me. For the next 2 years, she kept talking to him. She made me promise not to tell my dad. I remember being 16 years old and I was getting dropped off to go to my dad's house. And she locked the car doors and she said, you have to promise you're not going to tell him because he's going to overreact. I promised that I wouldn't tell my dad. She thought that I was doing it on purpose. I remember her saying, why do you think everybody likes you? Not everybody likes you. When I told her about what he was doing, because for 2 years I was telling her, he is weird. He told me that he was only talking to my mom because he wanted to have sex with me. He basically used her because he knew that she was and really out of it. I remember us putting our makeup on together before he was going to come over because she knew that he was into me. She used that. I have a little sister who's 5 years younger than me, and my sister was not really around very much because she would always go hang out with her friends, and her way of coping was to just avoid, be gone. But I was like my mom's little best friend. I was there during everything. She would have my sister leave, and then we would get ready together, do our makeup, get dressed really cute. She would invite him over. We would all hang out for like an hour, and then they would go to her bedroom, and then they would have. And she kind of acted like it didn't happen sometimes when I would bring it up, but then other times when it was like right in front of her face, she would just blame me. I was trying to steal her boyfriend. It was really confusing because I didn't know that it was wrong. I just thought that I was doing something wrong. I would go to school and tell my friends, like, this guy never wears clothes and he always exposes himself to me. I remember telling my grandma, and she was like really like old school Catholic. She told me I needed to go to confession. She acted like I did something wrong. When I was 15, I told my school counselor. She didn't report it. I don't think I really knew that there was anything wrong with what was going on until he started trying to do it to my sister. When she was 10, he called her. My response was to get help for her. I took her and we went over to my neighbor's house, and I told the neighbor what was happening. And I didn't mention what he had done to me, I just said what he was doing to her. And she told us to stay away from him, basically. But that was it. All these people knew, but nobody did anything. So when I was 16, I moved away. It wasn't until that I told my dad what had happened. And he cried when I told him. He basically said to me, well, do you want me to handle it, or are you going to handle it? And I said, I don't want you to do anything because that's not going to make anything better. And he said, okay, well, I'm going to help you find someone to go report it to then. Is that what you want to do? And it took me a couple days, but I decided that I wanted to pursue reporting it. Right after I reported it, I went to my mom's house and I let her know that I reported it. She got super mad. She's like, it happens, but you keep it in the family. You're not supposed to tell anyone. She grabbed my arm and she tried to make me go over to his house and tell him that I reported him. I yanked away and I said, I'm not going with you. And she went over to his house, told him that I reported him. A few months later, he was actually arrested and he was held on $1 million bond and he got out. The process of the investigation took an entire year, and then the trial was 1 week long. My mom testified against me in trial. It was really traumatizing. The trial itself was almost just as traumatizing as what had happened because I had this entire room of people blaming me. When I was younger, one of the things that he would tell me was that I can't tell anyone because he'll make everyone think that I'm. That's what he said. Ultimately, they won, and he was found not guilty on all counts. They totally victim blamed me the whole time. 1 month after the trial, and he was found not guilty, I received a restraining order, and so I was back in court, this time me against him, and he was trying to claim that I was stalking him. I couldn't afford a lawyer, so I represented myself. But the lawyer he had representing him was the same one that represented him in trial. So this was the same lawyer that victim blamed me a month before. The first judge said, are you sure you don't want a lawyer? And I said, no, I'm good. I can do this. It's important to me that I represent myself. I got to put my sexual abuser on the stand and ask him questions, and these questions were things that did pertain to the sexual abuse, because he was trying to say that I was stalking him, and I was saying, no, I wasn't stalking you, you were abusing me. He totally got angry. I flustered him and he told on himself. A couple weeks later in the mail, I got a letter saying that the restraining order was not granted and that the judge actually believed me. I felt like I took all my power back. He went from being this monster in my head that could do anything to me to being this scared guy that wasn't in control of anything, and everything changed in that moment. After the trial ended, I moved to Florida and started a new life. I started an organization called the Youth Butterfly Project. While we cannot control what bad people in this world do, I'm passionate about making sure that kids always know that they have value and that nobody should ever do anything to cause them harm. Now I am married and just recently had a baby. My message for survivors would be to never stop talking about it.